Hello, welcome to a subtraction session. I am Nell Derek Debevoise Dewey, Nell 3D, because we got to subtract some of those syllables. And I'm so thrilled to be here with Syama Bunten of Wealth Catalyst and so much more. Syama, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Your smile just makes it worth it every time I see you now. What a gift to spend this time with you. Thank you for having me.
Likewise. And so the big topic today is wealth, right? It's love month here on Subtract to Succeed. And we talked about romance, talked about love, talked about power, and we're closing with wealth because I think these are all love languages in really important and really heartful ways. And that is why Shama is the guest of choice to have this conversation about wealth, because I've just been so blown away since I found you a few months ago, really, and have dug through your podcast and learning more about this freedom tour. It's such a fabulously of the moment, of the future, feminine but powerful version or lens on wealth. And so I'm really excited.
Thank you. Woo! I'm excited too.
Yeah. So we were talking in the prep, and obviously subtract to succeed, right? So these sessions are always, what if we subtracted X? And we all agreed that we do not want to subtract wealth. That's not the goal here. Nobody's out to do that. So don't worry, your checkbooks are safe. And reading through your stuff, you're talking about freedom. The podcast is Get Rich Together, and it's this incredibly democratic, transparent, beautiful, inclusive way of talking about money in all the ways and wealth even more dimensionally than that. And, you know, if we asked folks, if, everybody stop, get a pen and paper and jot down the first 10 words you associate with wealth, I'm guessing it may not be freedom, inclusive, collaborative, transparent, right? Those are not the things we associate. And so I am very clear that there is at least one big thing here to subtract about how we interact and pursue and use and harness wealth. But I don't know yet what it is. And so you're the expert, and we're going to get there in conversation.
I love that. It's so interesting with what you just said. The thing that came up inside of me, and this is actually just really based on these last 6 years of having conversations with hundreds of women. Women often won't share successes because they don't want to make others feel bad. And then they
Mm,
don't want to share struggles because they don't want to look bad. And so when I think about what you just said around, yes, when you think about wealth, like people don't normally think of freedom and abundance. In fact, they think about the opposite.
mm,
You ask someone about money, and the very first thing that they'll say is, man, I really missed out on X. I wish I did something differently. I was hoping that this would have turned out in a certain way. Oh, I'm not where I want to be. Chances are, these women who I'm talking to, 99.9% of the time, have never stopped to look back on the millions of decisions that they've made throughout their lifetime to get them to the point that they're today that are successful
mm.
decisions,
Yeah.
right? Like they're not looking at the things they've done right. They're really focusing on the things they've done wrong.
Yeah.
And so when you were talking, I was like, man, like what if we could remove the shame, the guilt, this like self-imposed continuation of a patriarchal system that now makes us propagate and perpetuate these systems of thinkings upon ourselves and to each other as women,
Mhm.
right? It's like, what if we removed that? Like, would we be able to stand in our greatness and hold space for each other's greatness? And
Yeah.
like, would we be able to like feel whole, right? If we weren't sort of conditioned to be against ourselves
Yeah.
and each other.
Yeah, totally. So beautiful. So I'm so tempted to just dive in, and I love
Sorry.
how you no, that's the perfect framing, and I'm tempted to take it further, but and I want to um just share your story of getting here, because I think always, right? I mean, for me, subtraction, like literally the car crash, right? Like there's a very clear story of why I'm here doing this about subtraction. And I know, but share with us kind of why you're pouring your heart and soul and days and nights to this Wealth Catalyst adventure.
So gosh, it was about 6, almost 7 years ago now, I filed for divorce.
Mm,
And I was a business owner in my first business at that time. and I was scared to file for divorce. Luckily, I had the means to file for divorce and the ability to do that. But the real catalyst moment was when I sent an email out to 50 girlfriends and I asked them if they would talk to me about money.
Mm,
And it wasn't that I wanted them to like tell me what to do. They were my peers. They were successful business owners, corporate executives, board directors, I knew they were investors. Like they were sort of running the gamut of this background. And I just wanted to know what they were doing. And 95% of them did not want to talk to me about this. They did want to have cocktails. They did want to go shopping. They did want to help me like get through my divorce. So they didn't like abandon me
yeah.
entirely, but they abandoned this conversation around something that's inextricable to how I live my life on the planet and everyone else, which is money. Like you just can't get around that. And
Yeah.
so that is really what set off a
Mm,
series of events that started with like feeling isolated, feeling abandoned,
mhm,
and then really starting to close my own like knowledge gaps, right? Taking the VC courses at Columbia, joining all the things, trying to figure it all out,
mm,
and then starting to ask women in other communities that weren't part of this 50
mm,
to talk to me about their money. And I started to look for something that I would later call a wealth expander.
mm,
And that is a woman who's willing to share what she's done, not with the purposes of telling me what to do, but simply so I could see possibilities.
mm.
So
Mhm.
that is what I've been after. And that is really what Wealth Catalyst is about. I mean, these are all peers in a room
Yeah.
who have built, inherited, developed their wealth in so many different ways,
Mm,
but they're all there in a room together to say, hey, I've been doing it this way. These are my experiences. And how can I learn and share with a group of peers in a way that isn't transactional, where we can
mhm.
actually, as my podcast says, get rich together, right? Do this together.
Yeah, so beautiful. Such a great. And so back to those 50, right? Not, of course, to shame them or call them out, but like, did you have any follow-ups or do you have a hypothesis on why weren't they open to that conversation?
You know, out of these women, and then also I'd say having now experiences through other conversations, there's a moving goalpost. And
Mm,
the moving goalpost is like, oh, maybe 5 years ago, I've advanced and hit my goals prematurely than I thought I would.
hmm.
And now that I've hit those goals, the post has moved. And now I have other goals to hit.
Yeah.
And so there's a lack of like recognition of one's own accomplishments.
Mm,
And there's a need to have to highlight and highlight the things that you did right, but most likely, and what happened in this case is people were thinking about the things they did wrong.
mhm,
Right. And so I think that money in and of itself triggers so many childhood experiences. It makes so many inferences onto your parents and how they thought about things. For 50 of those women, all of them, none of them had thought about this before. The three courageous women who wanted to talk to me, two of them wanted to introduce me to their wealth managers, and one of them was like, Shama, I will go on this journey with you.
okay.
And I will be open and vulnerable and not know. So I'll say this moving goalpost thing is still something that I know even I suffer from.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
hit a goal and I don't ever stop to say, wow, like I did these things right.
Yeah.
I'm always like, on to the next thing,
Yeah.
what else am I gonna do? So I
Yeah.
get it. It made me feel poorly at the time.
Yeah.
But it's totally understandable because we can all see ourselves in each other in those moments.
Right, right. No, I mean, I think that's so real, right? The whole subtraction audience is gold star junkies, as we politely call ourselves, of that. And look, it's inherent and it's a beautiful thing to be a striver and to want to do more and grow and achieve and can get really toxic, right? All of our strengths have that shadow. So
And
that's
what is
so
enough?
real. Well, correct. And money has a particular flavor, right?
Yeah, it hits you in a place that like can send you on a spiral, it's like money and then the four other most dangerous words you can ever tell someone, which is like, we need to talk. It's like you get a text message from someone saying that and you're like, Oh my God, what's going on? Your world gets small.
Yeah.
Money can have the very similar effect, right?
Mhm.
It's like all of these things go up that are negative because all
Yeah.
of a sudden you assume a money conversation has to do with something bad. You
Mm.
assume it has to
Mm.
do with, oh, taxes, right? Most people think about
Mm.
taxes when they think about money, or they think about bills, or they think,
Yeah.
like people don't often think about money and think about possibility and
Mhm.
think about opportunities
Mm.
and think about the power when they have capital agency with that money, right? Money is such a great vehicle and tool for us to create the lives that we want. And yet, more often than not, we think we don't have enough.
Yeah.
We think that we haven't done well with what we've got.
Right.
If you do think you've done well, you always think that there's more to do, right? It's
Yeah.
like there's so many complicated entry points here that make it a really shameful experience
Yeah.
for more of us than I'd like to admit.
Yeah. Yeah, the shame piece is so real. I know you kind of hypothesized maybe that's part of the subtraction or that subtraction. I think that's real. And, that is the magic as I play more and more with this idea of subtraction. We talked about subtracting idealized romance and the fact that, like, there's this made for TV version. Of course, I had to nerd out and go to like the etymology of the word. And one history is like literally stories about knights made for entertainment. That was a romance, right? But if you go to the original etymology, romance means not in Latin. It means Roman, like in the local language. And so I was like, that's the kind of romance we want, like authentic, right? In the local language of you, of your loved one, of your colleague. Like we can romance all of these people. And I
Oh,
think with money, if we go back to the root, it's literally like salt used to trade for rice or horses. Like and now it's paper, meaningless paper that we've made, not rippable or burnable to
I
not have
mean,
to carry around salt. Like,
it's funny. It makes me think of, when you think about what we talk about these days as currency, which is
uh-huh.
really a current, right? It's like, okay, like currency is like how we exchange value and meaning, right, with this paper. But it's also it's a current, right? It is not to woo-wooify the topic, but it's like this is a space where we're literally exchanging value with energy and we're representing that through a piece of paper.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so this idea of like the movement of that, right? Like the money needs to be flowing. Like the stagnation of capital also doesn't do well because if you think about like innovation or what industries need to be invested in now
Yeah,
in order to support, the next 50, 100 years of like capital market growth,
yeah,
we're seeing people use their currency and their current women, especially into women's health and into like things that are so important. And so, currency is energy.
yeah,
And it's like an important way where I think we get to like drive home these powerful things that we want to put our life force into because the money came from somewhere, right? Someone worked for it.
mhm,
Somebody did, right? It doesn't matter if it was you, someone else. Like there's energy that went behind what this piece of paper signifies. And it has the power to like push forward ideas through industry in ways that I don't think we've really fully been able to recognize or realize as certainly as women.
yeah, totally, totally. I was at this conference where your colleague, Marcia Daywood, who's doing the tours with you, and she was one of the speakers, which was great. And so it's by a kind of peer angel group in Connecticut where I live most of the time, called Tidal River, and they had this fabulous day-long conference on money and investing. And that's really the driver behind the fund that these women started is to get more women investing and comfortable and to invest in women and minority-led companies. But really their primary thing is activating women as investors to feel comfortable and get experience and all that. Anyways, it was a fabulous day. And one of the points that came out that just like landed in my notes, I'm like, okay, we have to talk about this with Shama, is the notion of wealth not as possession, but as stewardship.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it exactly picks on that difference of like stagnation, clinging, stillness, accumulation to the flow in a literal, not woo at all, like not like candles and like manifesting, but like literal flow of cash to me, from me, to the bank, to the entrepreneur, to like that's what money does, right? And I just that idea of switching from possession to stewardship felt so and the point that the wealth advisor who shared this was making was that's how she sees her female clients engage. If and when they do, that's what activates them, or that's what's bringing them to the table. I'm curious if that kind of dovetails with these wealth expanders you're working with.
Totally. It's a highly feminized approach to like the way the world operates.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that inherently we as women, we sort of intuitively know who needs what,
Mm,
like what
mm,
needs a little more extra care and love, not to take away from our more balanced male partners who also can embody masculine and feminine, and also the women who I get to work with and spend time with who are also masculine and feminine. But
uh-huh,
this ideology of how we treat money has historically been very much about conservation
mhm,
and preservation, and really building up silos,
yeah,
and I think that sort of by nature women are not in silos, right?
mhm,
Like even through our hunter-gatherer tribal periods, women were together, like we
yeah,
were sort of in community, right? We were stepping up to serve and support one another for a greater good. Now,
mm,
that doesn't mean that the greater good meant that we were poor. In fact, the greater good meant that we actually all had what we wanted and needed, right? So the greater good actually is abundance, right? The greater good is, the pie gets bigger. And I
yeah,
think that there's a interesting inflection point where women get to really own up. And unfortunately, we've been sold so many prescriptive values or
mm,
prescriptive ways of having to show up in the world, most often in business, from my own experience, as needing to be more like a man to be
mm,
successful,
mm,
right? Like I had to do a lot of unconditioning of what that looked like.
yeah.
But
And
this
say unconditioning what? I love that. Like double click on that. What did you have to
Oh,
unlearn?
I mean, I had to learn how to not be so extractive.
Mm,
Right? It was like when I was building business, it was very much about like tons of like value creation and extraction,
mm,
but not necessarily about regenerative like ecosystem, right? Like it was really about like me as the founder and CEO extracting value for the organization,
mhm,
which equaled me. Right. So like that's, when you're the founder, the health of the business
mm,
oftentimes equates to your own personal ability to have ownership, right? And I also was highly punitive of myself, which is also a real masculine tendency, right? So, like, punitive in the sense of needing to overperform, needing to sort of put transactionalize relationships,
mm,
right? And so that was a way that I'd operated, before I went through my divorce. It was very much around I tell people all the time, my ex-husband and I were great at spreadsheets together. Like really good at like the spreadsheets of life, really bad at like collective vision goals and like what we were on this planet to do. And a whole huge part of me had to shift as I went into moving out of extractive mindsets to really thinking about what does the greater whole, what can it look like? And how can this be bigger than maybe anything I imagined?
mm,
Right. And that's what's been so different about what I've been building these days is because when I started it, I was very clear that this was not about me,
mm,
that this wouldn't be successful without other people who equally believed in this,
mhm,
and that we needed all women to stand up in their greatness
mm,
and stand up in their humility.
yeah,
Because by only showing my greatness for so many years, I actually lost. I didn't win. It was a losing proposition.
yeah. So elegant, so real. And so, what are you seeing on the road in the Freedom Tour in these rooms, small and large, in the summits, and then these phenomenal podcast conversations that you're having? Like, what are what's the journey from silent, shamed, you know, scarcity to a wealth expander? What happens for people?
It's so cool. So in these salons, we give like a little taste of the summit. And a big part of that is, sharing your financial successes,
Mhm.
which again, we never do. And another part of that is sharing things that you're looking for and things that you have experience in. And
Mhm.
so like that automatically in a room allows you to become a teacher and a student and to go,
Mhm.
hey, I'm really looking for a new wealth manager, tax accountant, estate planner. I want to invest in women's health. And someone else going, oh, I have experience in these things. I've got somebody. Like, how do we sort of take education as it's currently been delivered to us, especially as women, which has been highly infantilizing?
Mhm.
How do we sort of turn it on its head and say, look, we're successful women who have figured a lot of things out. Like, how about we ask each other what we're doing, right? And start there and then use experts for what they were really designed to do, which was to execute.
Mhm.
Experts are not
Mhm.
like educators, right? Most educators are also not experts,
Mhm.
right? Like a lot of people are teachers who don't have professionalized backgrounds, right? They're not actively in industry. A lot of experts don't have education backgrounds and know
Mhm.
how to talk to people and help them see things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure on experts to be educators. But I believe that we need to start using experts for what they're intended to do, which is to
Yeah.
execute on a strategy or a vision that you have.
Yeah.
And so in these rooms, we get a chance to sort of share and learn from each other quickly, and then be able to get connected to the people and sort of the businesses that we need to get connected to. And
Yeah.
so it's been amazing. It's been incredible to see all different kinds of rooms all over the country so far get inspired by each other,
Mm.
and come together. And the summit is really just a much larger platform for that.
Yeah.
Every woman in the room at the summit is qualified to be on stage.
Uh-huh.
You know, I like to say it's similar to TED.
Yeah.
If you've been to TED, it's like everyone can be on stage. The only difference is what is the conversation that we're having.
Yeah.
And that is what I love so much about the summits is that women are getting a chance to hear creative ways to build their wealth,
Mhm.
entrepreneurship through acquisition, launching a business in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, investing in women's sports, investing in deep tech, like real estate. Our financial life is so much bigger than we've actually given ourselves credit for. And like what we can do with it is so much greater. And I think all we need are wealth expanders to help us see what's possible and bring the tactical and the emotional realities to roost so we know what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. So good. I loved you said that, especially the salons are kind of hyper local, right? So they're intimate and they're in a community, and that you're seeing people who know each other not know they're going to be there and see each other, right? And I mean, back to your creation story of this wealth catalyst, what a catalyst to just open that topic, right? And remove that silence so that those two women, when one, God forbid, gets divorced or gets laid off or decides she does want, a vacation home for her grandkids and needs to figure that out, can be like, oh, you're okay on money. Like we can talk about this, right? That's an amazing unlock.
It is, because also money is non-linear. And I think that like there's a lot of shame in thinking that money is linear. And when it's not linear, which it isn't for anybody, right? Like there's a feeling like we're doing
And what do
something,
you mean nonlinear?
meaning like high cash flow out years where
Uh-huh.
you're like, there's a lot of expenses. Like kids are going to college, you're buying a new home. Like
Yeah.
money goes out and then you can have high cash flow in years like the stock market's doing well, something IPO, you sold a house, like we don't often think about how non-linear the journey is. There's sort
Yeah.
of this expectation that you're just going to graduate from college and then it's going to just go hockey
Ramp
stick
up.
up. Yeah, and that's how our money journey is. It's just not the case, and the
Yeah.
money is there and it's there for us to do something with. And so this idea that there's shame behind taking the money out and putting it into something else
Right.
is also really interesting
Right.
because it's your money, which means that you can do with it what you want. And yet there's a feeling of okay, I can run $100 million business, but maybe I don't feel confident asking my wealth manager for $100,000 to do something. And you're like, but wait a second, I know how to do this. Like, why is there such a disconnect, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That, what did that just make me think of that I immediately lost because I got excited about that idea? Oh, totally, right? The ups and the downs and the ins and the outs and the balance. And the other piece I think about, and I don't know if you see this too, when I talk about nonlinear in life and in achievement and success, right? Because I think there too, we think linear, like as you said, college, grind, marriage, kids, bank, retirement, whatever. It's systems, right? We are systems of skin, of blood, of muscles, of bones, of brains, and we operate in systems of family, of teams, and so I think, what about that, right? Because money too is a system, right? We have a portfolio of multiple assets, and some of those are financial or directly financializable, monetizable maybe, and others are intangible, just like a company, right? We have a personal brand that might be on our balance sheet. We have intellectual capital. So there's that systems approach too.
Totally. I think that it's it's a pie, like it is not just simply when you open up your Schwab account or your Fidelity account, it's not just the number. It's a compilation of things. One of the things that I do at the end of each month is I will look back on the month prior and I will look at through photos, like what are all the
Mhm.
highlights of the month?
Mhm.
What are all the things that really brought me joy? And I'll, you know, take some of my favorite photos and just kind of put them aside to remind me of like all the great things. And then I'll go through my like bank statements, financial statements, and I'll look at all the great things that like I had the privilege of being able to spend money on that I actually really can honor and respect myself for.
Mhm.
And I think that there's such a disconnect, especially now that none of us get like paper cash anymore. And I can't remember the last time I had like money, there's a disconnect around like the meaning and value of what things are for. You
Yeah.
and how we can sort of make sense of the experiences of life that we all know are more valuable than the bank account statement,
Yeah.
right? Like we all live for experiences. The number one thing out of the podcast everyone always tells me is, I'm like, what's your most fabulous way you spend your money? It's always experience, always travel,
Of course.
always on doing it. But that is not a handbag or a technology. And so, like, when we think about the things that define our wealth pie, if you will, like
Mhm.
being able to look back and recognize the good moments, the great experiences, and almost having like a file for that,
Mhm.
I think can really help to reinforce like what the hell we're doing this for. Because at the end of the day, it's like this human thing is
Yeah.
complicated. Like
Yeah.
we are just all here trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah.
And we're constantly, to your point around systems, we're constantly trying to game our own systems.
Yeah.
Like, how do we game ourselves so that we can sort of make sense of the human experience and live a life that at the end of the day, at the end of that life, we deem to have been worth living, and ultimately knowing that we all die, like we want to live a life worth dying for
Mhm.
because there's nothing that's going to escape us from that. And so when we think about what's at our disposal, it's the experiences, it's the gifts that we can buy for other
Mhm.
people. It's being able to buy beautiful things for ourselves, but to enjoy, right? It's enjoyment, it's pleasure, it's sending our kids to the schools they want to go to, or simply being able to care for loved ones or pay for bills. John went through a heart surgery last year, my husband, and the price of that surgery was $150,000. And luckily, we had like all the right insurances and all the right this and all that, and so we didn't bear that burden.
Mhm.
But like, oh my God, like what a gift to have been able to be in a position to be able to weather something like that, right? That is freedom,
Yeah.
right? Like that is freedom to be able to live life in a way where you're like, okay, I think I've got this kind of sort of.
Despite our very problematic healthcare system and lack of a safety net and, right? I mean, that's the next episode.
Yes.
But, that's very totally that is exactly the freedom is within these constraints of this capitalist extractive society that we've built for now.
Yes.
how do you get that freedom, which doesn't come cheaply, right? So, yeah.
It doesn't. By virtue of being born, we are all inherently complicit in a capitalistic world, no matter if you like it or not. So, like one of the podcast episodes I did was with this wonderful young woman, Mel Dorman, who built her real estate empire off of seller financing. And her story was around she thought that money was bad because she was like for the people
Yeah.
until she realized that not having money made her not even be present for herself, and for her family. And so, like, no matter if you like it or you don't like it, there is a sense of self-responsibility
Mm.
actually to like open your eyes to what is possible
Hmm.
today that maybe wouldn't have been possible 50 years ago as a woman,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like
Well, I
what
mean,
kind of power
like having
does
a
that
credit card.
totally no credit card, not getting a home loan.
To
I
say
mean, there are
nothing
so
now.
many things that we have benefited from in the last 50 years
Yeah.
that this moment, when I've gone on the salon tour, I've been coining a moment called the Great Wealth Enlightenment. And
Mm.
it's this moment where it's like for the first time in the entire world's history, certainly in our nation's history, can women really have ownership as well as inheritorship, as well as sort of generational and spousal transfers and stewardship. So
Yeah.
this is an interesting confluence of events that are happening
Yeah.
that we cannot turn a blind eye to because it's accelerating. Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
all getting fester. So
Right.
like you can't be like, it doesn't matter to me. It's like inaction will make our nieces, nephews, younger generations, children suffer, right?
Yeah. We could go on and on. I'll wrap us up, but to that point, which I think is so beautiful, with so much of what I talk about, which, you're the deep dive expert here, but all the subtractions, part of what I'm trying to call out to people, and of course people are seeing on their own, is that, we have this built-in, biologically wired, real risk aversion, right? Change looks and feels scary, and goodness knows change right now is not happening at a human pace. It's exponential, which is beautiful and opens opportunity, but is different and not how we're wired, right? So the unlock that I think I see people in different sectors of their life realizing is that actually inaction, to your point, certainly, or even just status quo action, is actually the risk because of what's happening around us. So to close, like, what's the biggest risk that you would encourage women and all listeners in this world of wealth to avoid?
Yeah, the what's interesting is that, by 2030, women are going to have 40% of all investable assets in the United States, right? By 2048, women will inherit, so this is like a number tangential to that, inherit $86 trillion, dollars, right? This is going to be in legacy portfolios. It's going to
Uh-huh.
be in all different kinds of asset classes, and you're going to have it, right? And even if you are not an inheritor, you have this earnership component, right? So you will have things that you probably never planned or anticipated on. Now, the risk of not being capitally active and taking agency with your money
Mm,
is simply that you are not going to be investing into the people, businesses, and ideas that will really sustain the future of the world
mm,
that you want to steward. For
mm,
example, women's healthcare. Right. It's like women are more likely to now be investing in women's healthcare when they realize how much their dollars can go into creating systems and solutions and outcomes that have never, ever in this lifetime been provided for us. So when we awaken to the risk that our capital, when left in legacy portfolios, will diminish quietly over time,
mm,
because those legacy portfolios are not investing in the future. They're investing in actually the peak of what we thought was going to happen 20 years ago, right? Apple was a vision 40 years ago, right? It's not the vision 50 years from now. And so we really have to think about what is the future we want to build? How do we invest in people, right? Not
mhm,
just businesses,
mhm.
but in the people that are shaping this future
Yeah.
such that your own individual legacy is not at risk of saying,
Mm,
man, I really lost here, not just assets, but I lost an opportunity to create the world I wanted for my children and my community.
Yeah, love that. Building for the future. No big deal, just that.
You know, what's interesting is I have found, I spent a lot of time. I used to, my mother is from Mauritius and I have family all over the world, and I've spent time globally. And what I've realized in doing this work is that in the United States, because our history is so young, most people really think about the power of their capital in their life simply really within their lifetimes.
Mm.
Right. There isn't a lot of recognition of ancestry beyond whomever was the family member who came here. There isn't a lot of thinking of our lineage and our past. When
Yeah.
you don't think of your past and your lineage, it's very rare that you'll think of your future and
Mm.
the future of the future ancestors and the people to come after you.
Yeah.
In Europe and in other places, they've been around a little bit longer, right? You have like this home has been in our family for hundreds of years, this legacy that we've lived or these family institutions. And not to say that all of that is good. There are certain
Mm.
problematic components of that. But in the United States, we could really do with a little bit of, thinking of future ancestors
Mhm.
and what it means to steward our lives, not just until we die, but for the people that come after us,
Mhm.
because there were people before us. We just happen to only celebrate one date of when the United States was born, but that's not when humanity was born.
Right. 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 Well, my goodness. There's just many subtractions here. We got to subtract the silence. We got to subtract the shame.
Mhm.
Subtracting the short-termism is so real, right? Subtracting the linearity and the one-dimensionality. We got it. We're going to come back for another conversation in a few months, I think. There's
I
a
love
lot to, there's a much purer, more powerful stewardship version of wealth to build the future we want. So I am so glad you're on the road doing it, and we'll include all of the places people can come hang out and become wealth expanders or have a platform to be wealth expanders. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Now, what a gift to have such a intellectually rich and
Mm.
generous conversation about the world. And I appreciate your friendship and your thought partnership
Yeah.
as we shape the world together.
Here's to it. Thank you so much, Shama. See you soon.